All right, everyone, it is noon on the dot, so I am going to get us started for today. Hi, my name is Katie Hart, and I will be presenting as well as moderating today's presentation. Our Wonder Chat today is called Preparing Children and Teenagers for End of Life or Time of Death of a Loved One. I wanted to mention a couple things just before we get started. You were automatically muted when you entered the webinar, so don't worry about that if you're just listening in. If you're attending the live webinar, you will be able to ask questions to the presenters in our Q&A feature, and you also will be able to communicate with each other using the chat feature. So I'll be monitoring both throughout the presentation, and we'll let our team know if there are any questions. If you're watching the recorded version, you are welcome to email questions to our helpline team, and that's helpline@wondersandworries.org. We do want to take a second to acknowledge that some of the content in today's presentation may bring up some strong emotions. We also recognize that some of you may have experienced loss, and parts of this presentation may bring up some related feelings. Please know that that is super normal and a natural response, and we encourage you to give yourself some grace, some space as you need it. We also will include a brief pause point about halfway through our presentation to give you a moment to reflect, reset, step away if needed. So please take the time as you need it today. If you would like additional support or want to talk through anything that comes up in today's presentation, we also encourage you to call our Wonders and Worries helpline team. That is 844-WE-WONDER. So it's 844-939-6633. And we are grateful that you're here with us today, and we want to welcome you. So our presenters for today are going to include not only myself, but the wonderful Kim and the wonderful Leah. We are all child life specialists, and we share a very deep passion and connection for this work. It was interesting because as we were collaborating on this presentation, we all had moments where we talked about how meaningful it has been for us to reflect not only on our own personal experiences with this topic, but also our professional experiences. Each of us bring a lot of knowledge and expertise from supporting families, navigating this incredibly difficult time of end of life care. And so before we begin, I do want to take a second and just acknowledge that this can be a very hard topic to talk about, even for us. It's often considered a very taboo subject, especially in the United States. And at Wonders and Worries, we want you to know that we believe it's important to approach these conversations with a lot of openness, a lot of reflection, and a lot of care. And so our hope is that today during this webinar, you feel that and you feel like this is a safe space for not only reflection and learning, but questions in a safe space. So thank you for being here with us today. So I do want to take a second, just in case this is your very first time interacting with us here at Wonders and Worries, to tell you a little bit about us. So we are a nonprofit organization. We are super unique, I think, because we are a team of child life specialists, and our goal is to help families, especially children who are the children of adults diagnosed with a serious illness or injury, navigate and cope with everything that is involved with that experience. So we provide services free of charge, and we are excited to say that we recently celebrated the opportunity to walk alongside families like yours for over 25 years now, which is pretty incredible, and we feel very honored to be a part of your journey today. So let's dive into what are we going to be talking about today. You may be really curious with our title, what exactly am I signing up for? I want you to feel prepared for this. So how we're going to do today's conversation is I am going to talk a little bit about how and when to talk about potential death and break it down by developmental level and give you some concrete examples of what that can look like. And then Kim is going to talk about the most common concerns that children and teenagers talk about relating to end of life, and then how we can create coping plans for that. And then Leah is going to talk about how we can prepare children for the time of death, as well as how do we support children at that time and shortly thereafter. As I mentioned before, we are going to have a break about halfway through the presentation, and that is going to be where we will also have time for some questions up until that point. So if I don't get to one of your questions in the chat or the Q&A feature, I may be saving it and trying to talk about it during that short break. All right, so let's get going. The first topic, so to speak, that I'm going to be talking about is how and when to talk about potential death with your children. And as I mentioned before, this topic can feel like such a hard conversation to navigate, especially if you've never had to navigate this before. But when I was reflecting kind of on how do I want to start off this webinar, this Wonder Chat, and how do I want to just talk about this concept in general, I was reflecting on the fact that this topic of death is a universal experience, right? This is something that we all unfortunately share at some point in time, right? The death of a loved one. And when I was reflecting on that, I naturally, because this is just who I am, went to some recent statistics. So the most recent statistics I could find showed that around 9% of children in the United States are going to experience the death of a loved one by the time they are aged 18. And that number more than doubles by the time they reach 25 years old. So when you think of those numbers, this is something that many of our children experience. They experience that death of a loved one pretty early on in their life. And so naturally, it brings up this question of, well, what do we do, right? How do we navigate that? And so that's what this section is going to be talking about. So, how and when to talk about death. Research shows that a lot of children, or many children, they want the opportunity to talk about and process that possibility of death. But at the same time, this is one of the most common concerns we hear from families and parents. I often get asked, well, how do I even start that conversation? Am I saying the right thing? Is my child going to be okay? What if I don't know the answer to all of their questions? Um, and I always start off this conversation with my parents by saying, the good news is that you know your child best, right? You can let your child guide how much information they're ready for and you're ready for, as well as how and when you share it. So you are probably going to know the answers to a lot more of those questions than I will. These are all just kind of recommendations that I'm walking you through. Um, Research has also shown that children have shared that they want information from a variety of different sources. So that could include parents and caregivers, that could include healthcare professionals, therapists, doctors, books, even the internet within reason. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But challenges can arise too with all of this. So children also talk about in research that has had in the last few years, they're worried about upsetting their parents specifically by asking certain questions. They don't want to cause emotional distress on you. They may not have access to that trusted professional in their life, right? Maybe they've never been to a therapist, or that's something that's just not realistic. And they may come across information that isn't age appropriate. And parents often identify talking about this topic in particular and responding to their child's question is one of the most difficult parts of navigating this process. And because of all of those things, I just came up with a few basic concepts and ideas to kind of get you thinking about how you can start and have this conversation. So the first thing is you're going to want to have those honest conversations. And we highlight this a lot as child life specialists because when you're honest with your children, you're not just building that trust, but you're kind of laying a framework too to address any sort of fear or misconceptions that you may not even realize that they have. So you're kind of creating that space, and you'll hear me talk about that space being important throughout a lot of this presentation. You can let your child's questions guide how much you share, and we want you to think about using some clear, simple language at first. I want you to avoid phrases. I call them the like soft phrases because they sound soft to you and I, but to children, saying things like they went to sleep or passed away when you're talking about a concept like death can be very confusing. So trying to keep it more concrete and simple. And then if you've been in any of our other Wonder Chats, you've probably heard me highlight this the next point quite a bit, but it is my belief that one of the most powerful and impactful things that you can do as a parent is when you don't know the answer to something, you say, I don't know the answer to that, but here's how I'm going to find out. Or maybe it's not an answer you're going to find out, but here's how I cope with that. And you're kind of modeling the fact that the world isn't perfect, that I'm not perfect, I haven't figured this out 100%, but this is how I navigate that. That is going to set so many building blocks for your children and their development and their developmental trajectory moving forward. And then finally, this may make you feel more nervous. It may make you feel a little bit more relieved, but this is not a one-time conversation. So this is going to be something that is ongoing. Your child may not respond the way you initially think at first, and that's okay. Or maybe they needed more space to process and you weren't prepared for that. That is all okay. These are going to be ongoing conversations. So when I am working with families, oftentimes I'm also talking about the fact that we don't have to have it all figured out that first conversation either. You don't have to go through the checklist, take the pressure off yourself, and know that this is an ongoing conversation. So let's break it down by developmental level and let's think about what your child actually understands. A lot of this is probably going to be like a aha moment or a review moment for you, especially as you're navigating so many different things with your children. But when you're thinking of your young children, so 3 to 6 years old, children in this age group, we want to keep this conversation simple, we want to keep it concrete, and we want to keep it reassuring. So when you think about children in this age category, cognitively, they understand more about the here and now. They are not able to understand that forward thinking or abstract train of thought, and they are very much in that imaginative thinking stage. So trying to remember to keep things more concrete. So these are just a few examples of what you can say, but I always kind of hone back to what does death mean? What is happening? And so you can say something like, when someone dies, that means their body stops working. Your children are probably at this stage where they're learning about all the different jobs and roles that things have, especially in their own body. So saying that what death means is that it stops working, is very impactful for children in this age group. On the same token, when your body stops working, a way to also describe it is that that person doesn't feel pain anymore because none of those systems are working. And another important point to highlight is that the doctors can't make this sickness go away. So it's very common for me to have a parent say, well, they assumed that the medicine that they were getting was going to make them all of a sudden better. And I usually point out the Tylenol example, right? Your children at this age, they're used to getting a fever, you give them a syringe of Tylenol and they feel better the next morning. So in their mind, right, they're thinking, well, why doesn't mommy just take Tylenol? So they need to understand that this is different than that. It's a different sickness and it's not going to go away with those medicines. Um, Play is going to be an amazing way to facilitate conversations in this age group. And I want you to think of your child specifically. Think of using toys, games they're familiar with, medical play, something that your child loves to do to kind of help either guide that conversation based off of what they're playing out or asking. Um, but also when thinking about you, so it's providing something tangible that you can do with your hands, something that's familiar to you, because if this is your first time navigating a conversation like this, it will feel better to have that sense of familiarity and that comfort for you as well. When going into school age children, we want to provide a little bit more detail while remaining clear and honest. So children in this age are they definitely have a more logical way of thinking about the world, right? And I say that more as a point to think about, and don't be shocked by if their response to this conversation is very logical. Um, it's one of the most common things I feel like parents will come back and tell me with this age group, no matter what the discussion is about, is, oh, well, their response was so logical. Like, what's wrong? And my response is usually, actually, that's pretty on par with their age group, and this is why. So don't let it shock you if they are very much more logical at this age and thinking about this topic. Common things we say to children in this age category are going to be things like, you did not cause this. That's huge. So, one of my first weeks working as a child life specialist, I was actually called to the emergency room because a child was so distraught in the emergency room after seeing their father who had a heart attack. He thought he caused the heart attack. And when I went in there and kind of like probed a few more questions about it, the child let me know that, well, I told him I hated him because I couldn't get ice cream that night. And then, the next morning his heart like exploded. He came up with this whole story. And then when I had gone back to his mom had talked about the way they had talked about feelings in their household was talking about how you hurt my heart. And so, right, like as I'm even saying this story, you can see the pieces align, right? Like they thought that they caused the heart attack by saying something hurtful. So this is something that's way more common at this age group. Saying that the illness caused the body to stop working is another important point. We may not know what caused the illness, but the illness is what's causing the body to stop working. And then leaving that open space that I was talking about before, right? That open line of communication. You can talk to me, or you can talk to Nona, or you can talk to your teacher, whoever those trusted people are for your child at this age, letting them know that that space is there, and that you will continue to have people check in on them, is going to be huge for this age group. And then when thinking about teenagers, so teens do understand more about the abstract way of thinking in the world. So it's normal for them to come up with a lot of these what if scenarios and questions and concerns because of that. It's important to provide this space, very much so for this age group, so that they feel like they can process and ask those questions and feel prepared as best they can and as much as they want, for this. So, saying things like, we can make plans together. Here is what the doctors know right now, and this is what they don't, and here's how we're going to navigate that. The other thing that I think is really important to highlight at this age is it's really common for teens to have every emotion under the sun and then none at all within the span of 10 minutes. That's normal, that's fine. Telling them that and validating that for them, especially with this topic, is going to be very influential for them because then it feels like, okay, this is normal. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is how I can reach out to someone or how I cope with it. So again, modeling and coming up with ideas for them to navigate and cope with these conversations. And then when I thought of, you know, the first few years, even as a child life specialist and navigating these conversations, over time, I felt like there were some phrases that I was very thoughtful in presenting children and families with. Mostly because when you have these conversations, you're trying to be supportive and show your support to children, to families. So when you're thinking of having these conversations with your children, these are some helpful phrases to have when you may need a second to just process and think about the amazing question your child just asked you, or maybe you do want to come across as very supportive throughout the conversation. These are some phrases I just came up with that I think are very helpful. I did want to highlight the one that I made the biggest, which is, I am so glad you asked that, because that statement is is huge, right? Like this is a green light for your child to feel like, okay, you're someone safe. You're going to be someone that I can process this information. You're glad, you're happy that I asked that. That is huge for your children, for them to hear you say that they feel like safe, that they can continue to ask those questions. So I highlight that one because I think that that one is so simple, but it tends to go a long way with our interactions with our children. And then finally, I wanted to highlight books as a way for us to use a resource. And you'll often find that child life specialists love to use books because, this is a resource that will help us navigate conversations when the words just feel so hard to come by and how to navigate. So this is a great tool. This is a really short list, mind you. So I want you to know there are probably hundreds of books out there. We have a big list of books on our website, on our Wonders and Worries to Go app. I'll have links to those at the end of this presentation. These were five that like I just we as a team use quite often. And then I wanted to spend, just for the sake of time, a couple seconds just on two of them. So the first one I want to highlight in this section is Why Do Things Die? And this is a great book to use as a tool with, think preschool, maybe young school age children. The pages, matter of fact, I have one. I don't know how easily you can see with my background here. Well, maybe not as easy as I was hoping, but they have little flaps in here. So I would use this definitely not as a book that I would read from front to cover, more as a way for your children to kind of explore. Maybe they're pointing to certain questions or flaps, and you're kind of using that as a way to guide your conversation with this age group. And then the second book I wanted to highlight is a wonderful resource that I really wish I had years ago, but it wasn't published, I think, until a couple years ago. But it's a kid's book about death. And this is a great resource to use with older children and teens. There's no pictures in there. It's really just like a guided way to help you talk about death and the feelings around death and how we can cope and respond. And one of the things I love about this book is there is a section at the end, and she refers to it as ideas to keep the love growing after death. And she goes through a whole bunch of like listed topics of things, right? To keep that love going. And so it's like wearing their favorite color, listening to their favorite song, things that are so simple and make it focus too on how am I gonna keep that connection going, which is often a concern and a question that we get from our older children. So anyway, I could probably go on for a long, long time, but this is a great place to start if you're curious about books and using them with your children. And I encourage you to check them out. And I am going to pass it to Kim.
All right. Thank you so much, Katie. Wow, those specific words and tips and tools are so beneficial to have. Um, so we're going to shift and focus on common concerns that we see for children and teenagers throughout illness, but then, of course, if the illness is progressing and we're preparing for and expecting death, end of life and death. So you'll see in these bubbles some of these things Katie has touched on, but just wondering, thinking about when will it happen? How will it happen? What will happen to my family? Who will take care of me? Will everyone I love get sick or die? Can I get sick too? And then, is this my fault, which Katie touched on. Um, Oftentimes, children don't verbalize these thoughts, and teenagers don't verbalize these thoughts. They might, but they might not. And so, I encourage you to just bring it up, to just say something like, oftentimes, children think about, will others that I love die? Because we're thinking about preparing for the death of this important person in your life. And then you go back to remember what's happening with your mom's body, your dad's body. And those things aren't happening to other loved ones' bodies. And I always encourage that we don't promise things that we can't promise, that we wouldn't say, I'm not going to die, because we don't know what tomorrow brings, but we can say, I'm not expecting that I would die. There's nothing that makes me believe that these things would happen. And if that changes, if that expectation ever changes, I will let you know. So just finding ways to bring up these common concerns openly to invite those questions. So what might it look like for a child or teenager? What might you already be seeing? Many of you watching this are like, well, I've already been seeing some of these things throughout the illness journey. These are all normal reactions to a challenging situation that you are all experiencing. So changes in a child's sleeping or eating, trouble at school. So really, this often just comes down to, and not just because it's a big challenge, but it comes down to being able to concentrate. And I imagine that for all of you, you notice challenges with concentrating, with, my brain's just not taking in information. I'm not remembering that information. And so, normalizing that, recognizing that that will happen, and it can create additional challenges. Children and tweens and teens becoming more clingy or having more difficulty with separation, or maybe withdrawing more than usual, spending more time in their room or more time away from you. Um, being short-tempered, having a short fuse, those strong emotions just being right under the surface where they might be more irritable, bursts of anger, bursts of sadness. Some regression. So Katie did a wonderful job of kind of focusing on developmentally what we might expect. And we do sometimes see a child that's maybe, maybe they're 14, but they're kind of regressing back to how they acted when they were maybe 10 or 11. That's comfortable. That was a time when they could kind of manage everything that was happening. And these concerns that we see are typically not conscious. It's not that children are aware that they're doing these things. It's just what happens when we're trying to cope. So that regression is a common piece. And then for teenagers, maybe some risk-taking behaviors, maybe some shutting down or withdrawal. It is okay to adjust your expectations and to talk as a family about reprioritizing and talking about maybe there are some stressors, pressures, maybe it's activities that your child has on their plate, but it's okay with you if they let some go. So you're talking through, would it be helpful to them to pause with scouts for a while or piano lessons for a while, and adjusting expectations at home. Maybe the routine as a family has been for them to clean their room every week. Well, maybe now you just say, you know what, we're not going to worry about that. That's not an expectation right now. So there are various ways that we can shift and adjust. So there's a concept that has helped me, and we've talked about at Wonders and Worries as colleagues. It's this idea of like puddle jumping into a puddle and jumping out. And you could picture a child having fun with this. But children naturally do this, what you also might call self-dosing or self-regulation, where they'll be in the moment with a heavy topic, a strong emotion, and then all of a sudden it shifts. So maybe you've just had a conversation about we're going to start hospice care and there's going to be a hospital bed coming into our home. And then your child says, can I have a snack now? Your teen says, can I go play my video game now? Oh, I want to go swing. And they're jumping back out of that. They're giving you that indication of, I need a break, I need a pause. And then they'll jump back in, or we encourage you to continue to bring up these topics and see, is your child thinking about it in this way or that way, doing those kind of touch points, and your child will jump back out. I can think of a child who was in a session at Wonders and Worries preparing for her dad's death, and the focus was on feelings. This was a 5-year-old little girl, and this 5-year-old was saying, I'm sad. I don't want daddy to die. And then in the next moment, she jumped out of her chair and she did a little dance and was shaking her booty, and she laughed and she said, my daddy and I do this booty dance that's really funny. And so seeing that shift is, it's normal, it's beneficial. And I actually have used that. I've had many people over the years in my career say, Kim, how do you do this every day? Like, how do you help children through hard things every day? And I say, I do it with their guidance, and I enter their world, and in their world, they can be fully in the moment playing and taking a break from what's happening, and I can join them in that. And so you may find that helpful as well, to just try to be fully in the moment with your child who does want to swing or play a game or do a silly dance. So I think it's important for us to touch on this concept of anticipatory grief. It may be something that you've talked about. It may be something that you've recognized for yourself, you're experiencing. Children and teenagers can experience anticipatory grief as well. What is it? One definition is it's a state of deep, painful sorrow that occurs before an impending loss. Anticipatory grief is grief. It's really the same process that we might experience after the death of a loved one. It might be described as a roller coaster. It might be described as waves of emotion. For children and teenagers, it might include worry about missing their loved one when they're no longer living. Who will take care of them? How will their life change? And I have found that thinking about it as waves, and that's why the picture is here, can be really helpful and can normalize for someone experiencing it, that it will come and go. And there might be a big wave that overtakes them and kind of feels like a flooding of emotion. And we're going to talk about ways to cope with that, but then also to remember that that will pass and there'll be calm spaces and kind of calm waters in the midst because children don't know, teenagers don't know that that feeling isn't going to stay and be there long term. Um, this point about how it may or may not assist in coping, how it can assist in coping is that it gives us an opportunity, it gives children an opportunity to prepare, to build those coping tools and those coping strategies, to understand what this grief feels like, and opportunities to communicate and to connect with the person who is dying and those around them. Um, Sometimes it may be that it's not assisting in coping. It could be, and I have honestly, over the 20 plus, 30 plus years that I've been doing this work, it's very, very rare that I've seen this, but it could be happening with children and families that aren't connecting with wonders and worries. But it could be that a child or teen kind of gets stuck in that grief, and it really inhibits their ability to connect, to communicate. And so let me give an example, though, of an 8-year-old who helped me know that, this can be very beneficial at times. So I was working with an 8-year-old whose dad had died, and we had supported her through, prior to his death and through his death. And we were playing a game, and a question in the game was, what is it? What is one of the worst things that can happen to a family? And I thought this 8-year-old would say, someone you love dies or your dad dies. But instead, she said, I think the worst thing would be having someone die suddenly. Like she was able to say at 8, if it's not expected, that would be a lot harder, I think. So she recognized the preparation piece was beneficial for her. So let's talk about the time where maybe what you're seeing is kind of out of that realm of typical or healthy processing. And two things to look for: the duration and the intensity of the behaviors that you're seeing. So maybe you're seeing a child who's having some trouble sleeping, and maybe they're having trouble sleeping every once in a while, but then that turns into every night and they're up all night. And you're noticing this intensity is increasing, or maybe just the amount of time that this has been a real challenge for your child is extending. And kind of a general rule of thumb, but always trust your instincts. A general rule of thumb is if you're seeing a challenging behavior extend past 6 to 8 weeks, that could be kind of that. I think I need to talk with some additional support people, reach out to professionals, maybe engage some additional help around what I'm seeing with my child. Um, Again, always trust your instincts. If your gut is saying, my child needs additional support, absolutely take steps to investigate and add that additional support. And then if the behaviors that your child is expressing, or if what they're experiencing is really impeding their ability just for the day to day, that might be an early sign. Maybe this has only been going on for a few days or a few weeks, but you're noticing right away this is causing a real problem in their ability to function day to day. So let's shift and talk about what we can do, some of these ongoing tools that we can use as parents, as adults, as caregivers to support our children and teens throughout their loved ones' end of life and death. And I remind myself of this quote that's at the top: you can't change the hard, but you can change the alone. This is something from, I don't know if you've ever listened to the Good Inside podcast from Dr. Becky, but something that she says: whenever I start to feel a little helpless and thinking about, I really wish I could change this circumstance for this child and family, I try to shift to, maybe I can't change the circumstance, but I can certainly create an environment where the child, the parent, the family does not feel alone in this and they feel supported. So let's focus on how we can listen, how we can support, and how we can empower. So this listening piece is really getting into that mind frame of listening to understand and trying to let go of the fixing, trying to problem solve or have an answer. But it truly is just, let me hear what you're saying and let me notice what I'm seeing. I can tell that you're feeling really sad, you're really confused or worried, feeling overwhelmed, making statements about that. You feel conflicted between spending time at home and spending time with your friends. It can be really difficult to think about and talk about these things. Um, Also know that when children are having strong emotions, it's very common, it's natural for them to avoid eye contact. They may look away, they may hide behind a pillow or stuffed animal or get under a blanket. They may also not be able to put into words what it is that they're experiencing. And so try to allow this and just kind of go with it as much as you can as a parent. I was working with a teenager, a 16-year-old whose mom was dying, and he was able to say to me, I can't tell my mom I love her. I want to be able to put it into words, but I just feel so overwhelmed whenever I try to put it into words. The words won't come out. And so what we did was we thought about how he could show her, and he came up with this symbol of just kind of tapping his chest with his fist. Like, if I do this and I look at you, mom, that means I love you. So that was a way to communicate what he wanted and needed to communicate without having to try to put it into words. So the next piece is that supportive piece. How do I surround my child with the support that's beneficial for them? Bringing in additional supportive adults if I need to, or just helping my child understand that these supportive people are here in their world and how can they utilize that support? So it's identifying and focusing on those other loved ones who will help care for your children, help care for them right now with what's happening and having kind of those plan A, plan B, plan C. If I can't be there to pick you up from school, our neighbor Sally will be there. Or you could go home with your friend, Tommy or Joey. Which friend would you like to go home with? And so you're thinking about the immediate, but then you're also talking about, I know we've been talking about and preparing for dad dying. When dad dies, I want you to know that I'll still be here to care for you. But if I ever couldn't be here to care for you, let's talk about who is available. Aunt Jenny, Uncle Tommy, and creating a concrete list where your children can add, your teens can add, you can add. These are all the people, and this is how they might be able to help. And then recognizing the unique needs of each child. Each of your children are different if you have multiple children, and what they're needing from different people is different. And I can think of a family where they were preparing for mom's death. She was on hospice care, and the 12-year-old daughter wanted to spend as much time as she could at mom's bedside. But the 10-year-old son, it was too much for him to be at mom's bedside. So he just wanted brief moments. So after school, the daughter would grab a snack, grab her homework, and go sit by mom's bed and spend a lot of time there. The 10-year-old would maybe go in, give a quick kiss and hug, and then he would be out with his friends playing at the neighbors. Sometimes we had kind of a teddy bear language where he could hug and kiss a teddy bear and put it on the bed if mom was asleep. And then he knew, I've let mom know that I love her. The teddy bear's there, kind of in place of me. Um, and then with routines, keeping routines as much as possible and communicating those routines to those other adults who are stepping in and caring for your children and family. Those routines help calm the nervous system. It reminds our bodies and our brains, oh, these are the things that we do. It also sends the message that not everything has changed. There's lots of things that are changing, but these things haven't changed. So talking about those, sharing those routines whenever possible. And then, of course, asking for help and recognizing when you don't have the support in place that you might need, and asking others to maybe help you find additional support and thinking that through. And then empowering. How do we empower our children? How do we help give them confidence that even though this is really difficult, they can do it and they're not doing it alone? Choice giving, we've been talking about that at different points in time, and Leah's going to talk more about that. But anytime we can offer a choice, that is that control piece that helps us feel like, okay, I can't control this, but I can control these things. Coming up with phrases, it could be like a mantra, just a positive phrase that reminds all of you in the family, we can do hard things. We're not alone in this. We can get through this. Just saying those things to each other. And then you modeling as much as possible. You don't need to get it right all the time at all, but being able to model, it's okay to let your children know that you're experiencing strong emotions too. And then this is what I'm doing when I'm feeling really sad or worried or overwhelmed. This is who I talk to. This is what I do to help with that. So we're modeling that emotional expression and utilization of coping tools. So let's dive in just a little bit more into coping plans and how we might create coping plans or support plans for our children. And it can be helpful to just talk about what do we even mean when we say coping. So one way to define coping is it's a term that is used to identify the thoughts and the behaviors or the actions or reactions that we have that are activated when we're trying to manage a stressful situation. So this often isn't conscious at all. We just are reacting. And for children, that's very true. And for teens, that's very true. But we can make it conscious. We can tune in and make more of a brain body connection of this is what's happening in my body when I'm having this feeling. This is what's happening with my thoughts. And this is what I can take control of. And so helping children focus on the thoughts and behaviors, helping them develop new healthy strategies, but they have to practice those strategies and they have to learn them and practice them when things are a little more calm. Because in the moment when we're overwhelmed, we can't learn something new at that moment in time. So, this is a strategy that has helped me. And thinking about how every person in your family is unique and different, and not just your children, but you, any other adults in your life, you all are going to have different ways of coping and different things that help you. And so, the way that something that's helped me is this idea that when we have a strong emotion, that creates energy. And that energy in our bodies tends to either be expressed through our mouth, through our hands, or through our feet. And so for me, I'm a express through the mouth person. So if I'm angry or if I'm really sad or frustrated, I may say things I later regret. I might cry. I might really need to talk to somebody. But I know that if I can find things that I can do with my mouth that are healthy, it might avoid some of the pitfalls that, can come up if I just react. So for others, it might be they get a lot of energy into their fists and their arms and their hands and they want to hit or rip. And others, they want to run, escape, kick. And so just thinking about that as a family and talking about with each of you, oh, mom's a hand person, dad's a run person. And it's very different. It can be very different and not always work well together. So let's say your whole family is kind of having a stress response, and one person wants to go for a walk and be alone, and another person really wants and needs to talk about it. Well, those two people may not be able to support each other as well in that moment, but they could understand, oh, yeah, Sally needs to go for a walk. I'm going to go I'm going to go call my friend or go journal, maybe in my journal. So, talking about it openly, understanding the different reactions that we each might naturally have, creating these coping tools and strategies and tips and supporting each other, and then revisiting and recreating new ideas along the way. Always expecting setbacks. We will not always utilize these tools. We'll use them and then we'll forget about them. And so just being gentle with yourself and your children. So here are a few ideas. I've talked about some of them. You're probably familiar with many. I want to mention the two pictures. The one on the left is a scream box. So this would work for me if I just need to scream. It's just a cereal box with newspaper stuffed inside and a paper towel roll. And you can scream inside that box and it muffles it if you're in a space where you really can't fully scream. For tweens and teens, doing something novel like this picture of smashing a pumpkin with a baseball bat can really be cathartic and can help provide that healthy release. At Wonders and Worries, we love to take a roll of toilet paper and a bowl of water and make big wet spit wads and throw those wads of paper at a target. And we'll talk about before we throw the wads of paper, like how it feels to think about all these sad, scary, frustrating things. And then after we throw the wet wads of paper, how is our body feeling? And I've never had a child say that they feel more uptight or more stressed. They'll say things like, I feel better. I feel more calm. Wow, that just felt great. And we talk about how the situation hasn't changed with what they're having to deal with, but how they're experiencing it in that moment has shifted. So then the last piece around this is actually creating coping plans or what we call support or safety plans. So thinking about the environment that your child is in, the different environments that your children are in, and what might they, you're kind of seeing around corners, what might happen and what kind of plan might they need in place. So at school, they might need to think about what if this wave of emotion comes over me? What if I hear a song or somebody says something and that brings up this emotion and I don't know how to deal with it? So I kind of know what that might feel like in my body. I've already identified with my teacher this could happen. And we've talked about I can put my head down at my desk and take deep breaths. And my teacher knows I'm just needing a moment. This is who I can talk to. This is what I can do. And the same thing at home. If I'm at home and my primary caregivers are not available to me, what can I do that I have control over? Who else can I go to? Um, at home, oftentimes at this kind of end of life time, we're aware and a new plan might need to be put in place if the ill adult is no longer able to be home alone, or if there's ever time when a child is home with that ill adult, if a medical emergency were to happen, what can that child do? What is the plan for them so they can feel more empowered? It's kind of like having a fire safety plan. Sometimes as adults, we get this idea of, gosh, if we talk about that, if we bring that up, that's going to make it feel like we're expecting that to happen or that's going to happen. But if you think about it like a fire escape analogy or a fire safety plan analogy, it doesn't mean that it's any more likely that a fire will occur. It's just we're going to have a plan in place so that we know what to do if this event happens. So, just to summarize with coping plans, discover and practice individual coping tools, identify those adults for your children who can support them, offer those choices, create coping plans and adjust regularly, and then plan those regular check ins. Um, so, here we are at that pause point, and I want everyone to just take a deep breath. I'm going to take a deep breath and maybe get a glass of water. If you're watching the recorded version, you can pause, take a break for a minute. Our helpline information is there at any point. Anyone can reach out. And let's just check in and see if we have any questions to this point in time.
So we do have a question that came through that I thought would be a great one to address. Maybe Leah and Kim, we can all kind of, I'm sure, have some examples for this one. But this person asks, what do you do when a parent or caregiver wants to use those soft explanations and not use words like dying and death?
So I was just talking about this yesterday with a hospice professional. We were kind of doing a little bit of an interview, and I naturally, actually, I used one of those soft expressions totally inadvertently. I said something about losing, like we lost. I use the word lost when somebody's going to experience a loss, and just that word loss sometimes can create this idea in a child's mind. Well, if grandma's lost, if daddy's lost, why don't we go find them? Um, so what I recommend is if you say those expressions, that's okay, but just follow up with what I mean by that is. Um, Try to use what Katie was describing, like what death is, or you could even check in with your child. What do you understand death to mean? And see what they're saying, but bring it back to, I'm saying this, but this is really what I'm meaning. Do either of you
I
have
also
anything else to add?
I always think back when I have questions like these, I always kind of want to ask to like the parent if they're, for example, saying, well, I don't know if I want to use that word specifically. I usually will prompt to a conversation about like, well, tell me a little bit more about like why? What are you worried about? What's making you feel nervous about using this term? Because more often than not, too, these types of questions that we get about like specific terms, the parent's intention is always good, right? It's always like they're wanting to protect and do the right thing. And that, I guess, is kind of more what I was referring to of like there are so many right ways to start this conversation and navigate this. And I love that Kim even said you're probably going to naturally say some of these things because that's just kind of how we've been taught as a society to also handle these conversations, and that's okay. Our concern is more towards, making sure that they really understand. I always think back to, some younger children who are used to either playing video games or watching their older siblings play video games and the character dies, but then 2 seconds later they're doing the level all over again, right? And able to keep going. So you're trying to make sure that they're not thinking of that term or what's happening like there's any misconceptions basically. So I always acknowledge that the intention's good. We just want to make sure that they're really understanding so that you can provide the appropriate resources and steps moving forward.
I love, Katie, that you mentioned, exploring that with a parent because I think sometimes too, we all come with our own past experiences. And so some things are very normalized for us. And so we don't even really think about what the idea or the implication of that idea is maybe for children, just like some of the examples that you gave. And so I think sometimes when we can just look at ourselves and our own experiences, then that can help us to realize what kind of conversation we want to have with our children.
And I will say, when we were collaborating on this presentation, I kind of highlighted this in the beginning of the presentation, but Kim and Leah and myself, like we all had such young experiences when we were thinking back and reflecting like on personal experiences surrounding this topic. And so I think that's something important too, right? Like you you can only control so much. And so you also need to figure out in your family, right? Like I said before, you can help have that child help guide the conversation of how and when and all those things. Like think back to just who your children are and what may be beneficial for them. And I think that oftentimes that leads to your answer of how to do all of this.
Yes.
Um, okay, I have another couple questions. So one is what recommendations do you have around communicating a timeline, a prognosis, or how much time to children?
I could start with this, and Leah, you can also, because I know we're going to get into some additional details. But what has always helped me is having parents think about, what's happened to this point, what's happening now, and what's expected to happen next. And that next piece, going back to those developmental kind of stages and phases, for younger children, you're thinking a much shorter time into the future. So what's expected to happen maybe tomorrow or this week? And as children are older, they're thinking further out into the future. So it might be more over the next months. This is what we're thinking, or the next weeks, and letting your children's questions guide you. There are many times when it can be very appropriate to give a time frame. Like a child may say, well, how much time is expected? Well, the medical team is thinking 3 to 6 months or 3 to 6 weeks. Trust your instincts around that. It's okay to say those things. And then you can also say, but we don't really know for sure, but this is kind of what we're understanding is expected.
I think I've had this conversation recently with some families too, who are in that category of dealing with like a stage 4 diagnosis or a terminal diagnosis and questioning, how do I share this information? And sometimes for younger children, it can be as simple as saying, I may have cancer for the rest of my life. And that doesn't necessarily imply this, immediate time frame if you don't feel comfortable giving that time frame yet. So there's some other language that you can use that lets them know that one, that you're not going to maybe get better, but it's how do I utilize this time that we have together. So that might be, one suggestion if you're not ready to completely give like months or years kind of dates to that prognosis.
And I like how you're both are pointing out too, like sometimes, it is again modeling that we don't know for sure, right, the exact time. And again, it's that feeling as a parent to want to like control and give this like timeline and this answer to your child to help protect them and prepare them. But it's also just as powerful, I think, like what Leah said, is to say, this is what the team has said. However, we don't know the exact time or when. And then I know Leah will go into this later in this presentation, but also talking them through what they can do, to feel more in control and at that time, which I know she'll go in later in this presentation. But those are great questions. I have another one in here. It's addressing more about, supporting parents processing a potential regret, saying that I wish I was there, like they're saying the children may say, oh, I wish I was there at the hospital when they died, or I wish they did not die at home on hospice. I know, so Leah's going to talk a little bit more in the remainder of this presentation about preparing and supporting children and teens at the time of death and shortly thereafter. So I think Leah, you kind of hint a little bit about, how to process even shortly after. But do you all have your thoughts on like, how you've supported children, if they've expressed regret, or maybe the parents expressing some sort of regret with wishing they did things differently? Do you have any examples that you could share with us?
I just want to say the power of fantasy and play, and so giving permission of to yourself and to your child of wishing it had been different. And let's talk about how we wish it could have happened and recreating the story. Even though you can't change the past, truly hearing what your child is saying, like, I really wish this could have happened. Tell me more about that. What would you have imagined that might have been like? Let's create that story. Let's think about what your dad would have said, how he might have responded. So going down that path of fantasy can be very empowering, and just acknowledging that there are things that we wish we had done differently. We're all doing the best we can in the moment, and sometimes we just don't have the information or knowledge that later we have, and we can look back and say, if I were to do that again, and you as a parent could say, if I were to do that again today, this is what I would have done differently.
I completely agree with Kim, and I think there's never a timeline on being able to reprocess that and go back to that experience, whether it is 3 months, 2 years, 10 years later. And so even for adults who maybe experience loss at a young age and are dealing with those feelings, that using the technique that Kim just discussed, I think is absolutely helpful. I think what we're going to discuss here in a little bit on some of the slides is being able to offer your children the opportunity to talk through and discuss and make some choices with you that hopefully will help them not have that regret later on, and that they will, whether, no matter which way they decide, they will be able to know that they had the opportunity to make some choices. And if they made a choice and they didn't later on feel like that was what they wanted to do and they would do something differently, then I think you still can come back and rediscuss and process that with them. And just like Kim said, have that conversation of, well, what would you want to do? What would you want that to have looked like? And that's okay.
You both gave perfect answers. I have nothing to add.
Should we jump
Um,
into the next section?
yeah, I was gonna say, I think we answered everyone thus far, but keep them coming in the Q&A in the chat, and I will monitor them and either ask them as they come or do it also at the end.
Perfect. We'll turn it over to you, Leah.
Okay, thank you. So I just again want to just start off by acknowledging the difficulty of the topics that we're discussing today. So please, just like we said in the first half, if you need to step away or you need to turn off your camera, we completely understand. All of the information is recorded, and you'll be able to go back and look at that at the right timing and the pace that you need for your situation. As Katie said in the beginning, most of us are never taught how to talk about death, much less walk through this experience, especially with our children. So when the moment comes to actually do that, we soften it, we avoid it, we search for the right words, and oftentimes we feel like we come up short. And so, what if talking about death and including your children in this process didn't have to feel so uncomfortable? What if it could actually be an opportunity to bring clarity, to bring connection, and even comfort to you and your family? And so, while certain situations, like the death of a parent, can feel deeply unnatural and heartbreaking, and the process of dying itself is actually a natural part of the human experience. And in many similar ways, it's just, birth is a normal part of the process, as just as death is. And so today we're going to walk through how to talk about death with your children and teenagers in ways that are clear, that are supportive, and developmentally appropriate, helping them to find understanding and comfort and a sense of normalcy in a time that feels anything but normal. So, as we previously talked about, we want to offer choices because they empower children, just like Kim focused on. And choices give them a sense of control in a time and a situation that feels really out of control. And just like adults, they're seeking purpose and meaning. And so this can be found when they're given opportunities to participate in this dying process in meaningful ways. Giving them all of these different choices are okay. The conversations are going to help them explore and process their feelings. Sometimes, just like we talked about in the question part, it might lead them to make a different choice than what they originally thought that they would do. When they realize that they have the freedom to choose, then it reduces feelings of expectation, maybe meeting other people's expectations. They get to choose what they need in that moment and what's helpful to them. And all of those things can lead to healthier coping and closure. So it's important to ask some of these questions that you see here on the screen. Do they want to visit? Do they want to be present at the time that their loved one is dying? Do they want to say goodbye in person? Do they want to write a note or draw a picture? There's no right way to say goodbye. There are lots of options and lots of choices that they can make in doing that. And then, how would they like to participate before the death, during the death, and afterwards? You might have a child that needs lots of information, and that helps them to feel safe and comfortable. So, do they want updates about what's going on? How frequently do they want those? Or maybe they're the child that just needs the basic information and they'll come to you when they need more. And then, how and when do they want to be told that the death has occurred? This is going to be an important piece that you want to add to that safety plan that Kim discussed earlier, because for some children, going to sleep at night might be difficult if they are unsure of what the timing of things might be. They might feel better about going to sleep if they know that they've told you that they don't want to be woken up. And that way they can just sleep through the night and they'll get what information they need in the morning. Or other children might have difficulty going to sleep because they're just in this hyper vigilant state of anything might happen at any time. So that's something that you're going to want to talk through with them. Again, like Katie said, you don't have to have all of these conversations at one time. It's going to be little bits and pieces, and you're going to allow your child to lead the way. So you can initiate some open conversations using some phrases like, I wonder what you're thinking about, or this is what is happening, and we need to make some decisions. I can help you decide what you'd like to do. So I want to set up a framework that you can use for preparation because preparation is going to be important throughout the entire process, but especially when we kind of focus in on this time period right around the death. You can use this when you're preparing your child for a transition in care, maybe from moving from standard treatment to possibly hospice care or moving facilities. Or maybe you need to explain to them about specific equipment that is they're going to see or will be brought home. Or maybe about certain procedures that are going to occur. This will help give you a way to organize your words and your thoughts as you have these conversations with them. So, first, we want to name what it is. So, explain what may happen in simple, honest terms. Honest doesn't mean giving all the information, it means giving accurate information, but as in doses that your child can use. But be specific and be concrete with them as you give that. And then next, you want to explain it. Describe the physical changes that they may see and experience. Always use tools that you might have available. It's helpful to use books or pictures or other items. And then you want to provide reassurance. Let them know that someone that they love that they love and trust will be there to support them and help them through this. That they're not going to be alone. And this goes back to some of the points we said earlier. Of you want to be able to identify that person, a prepared, trusted adult who can provide that support, who understands the difficult answers that need to be given and is going to provide information in a safe, appropriate way that's within line with what you desire. So you may not be able to, whether you're the ill parent or whether you're the another caregiver that's very close, you may be focused on other things. And so making sure that somebody is going to carry this through the way that you desire is important. Next, you want to prepare them, and we want to prepare them using the five senses, and we're going to dive deeper into that in the next slide. And finally, I want you to always invite questions at the end. Let children do this at their own pace. This gives them space to process, to wonder, to express the fears and the anxieties that they might have, and to seek the information that they need in order to understand what's happening. Normalizing experiences help reduce fear that something is wrong or unexpected. So things can be unfamiliar, but it doesn't mean that they're abnormal. And so by you normalizing these experiences, you're helping with that. Be slow, intentional, and unrushed when you can in having these conversations. And know that your kids, they're going to come back to you with maybe the same question over and over. And that might seem frustrating or irritating at times, but recognize that repetition provides safety and security to your child. They're asking again to make sure that they're going to get the same answer and that nothing has changed. All right, so what we want to do is we want to prepare using the five senses. Children are naturally wired to take in the world around them through their senses. So when we think about what to share, think about what has changed recently. Where is the parent? Are they at home? Are they in the hospital? Are they receiving hospice care? Talk about the person. What has changed in their body, their appearance, as well as the environment that they're in. Or the people or the things that they're going to encounter in these new spaces. Help them identify who the helpers are that they'll meet. Explaining hospice sometimes can be a little bit challenging. And so some phrases that you can use around that are hospice helps people feel as comfortable as possible. Or hospice doesn't fix illness, but it helps the person feel safe, to feel calm, and to feel cared for. Or maybe you explain it by saying that hospice helps families be together. And so these are good ways that you can explain some of that transition. And then also consider the child's perspective. If they're walking into a room, where are the things that they're going to see? Are they at their eye level? Do they seem big to them if they're a little child? Just consider all of the different aspects of the sensory information that they're taking in. And when possible, provide opportunities for them to touch and explore the things in that environment. Check in with your child often and assess their understanding. Listen to what their concerns are and provide support as needed. The first one we'll walk through here is sight and hearing of the five senses. So thinking about what they might see and hear, how has the parent's appearance changed during this recent time? Think about the equipment that's present in the room. Talk about how that equipment is helping um, the person. What is the job of that equipment? If you can, prepare them with pictures first. It can be less frightening than actual objects. And a great example of this is a client, an 8-year-old boy who was at home and his parent was going on hospice care. And as the hospice team arrived and they were bringing in all of the equipment that would be needed, they carried in several oxygen tanks. And later, the little boy expressed a question to his family about why are they bringing bombs into my house? And so the misconception of what he was seeing, because that was a new thing that hadn't been in his environment before, led him to have a little bit of fear around that. And so it's important to clarify and prepare them for that. Also, think about all the different sounds that may occur in this new environment. So, there might be, if it's a hospital environment, there might be lots of voices over the intercom, or there might be lots of beeps of different machines that are in the room or nearby. If it is close to the time of death, it might be changes in the sound of the breathing of their parent or loved one. So, as all of those things are shifting and changing, even though they're subtle, they're really important to bring up and talk about. I worked with a couple of girls who their mom was on hospice care, and some equipment was brought in and to monitor her for a period of time. And there were beeps and things that would go off from time to time. Sometimes the beeps meant that medication was ending. Other times it was an alarm for something. And both of the girls, the way that they reacted to that, one of them was just very agitated by the noise in general, that it was just a new noise in her environment and she just didn't really care for it. But the other one was a little more distressed and sort of, again, got that sort of hyper vigilant state of always listening because she never knew if the alarms meant that it was something bad was happening and everybody needed to respond quickly, or if it was just a normal change of medication. And so explaining that to her and setting up the parameters around that was really important. So I want to walk you through on this next slide using the framework that we discussed to talk about a very specific example of a way to talk through introducing a piece of equipment. So, say your loved one is in the hospital and they're going to be on a ventilator. A ventilator can be a scary thing and it can be a hard thing to describe to a child sometimes. But if you use this framework, it'll make it easier. So, start with naming it. This is called a ventilator. It's important to use the actual medical terminology because kids are going to hear that, and that way it won't be unfamiliar to them. And then explain it. The ventilator helps the lungs breathe in and out. And then reassure them. The ventilator is helping dad because his lungs are very tired from working so hard to breathe. And then prepare them, again, using those five senses. So you want to say, here's what you might notice. Each time the ventilator moves air in and out of the lungs, you'll hear whooshing sounds and you'll see his chest rising and falling. Sometimes you might hear beeps and other noises, which help the nurses know how to adjust the machine to help dad be comfortable when he breathes. And then invite their questions. What else are you wondering about? The next set of senses that we want to talk about are taste and smell. And it's interesting. Food is a big part of our lives, right? Think about your child and their age and their understanding. Think about how they physically feel when they're hungry. And then explain how this might be different than what their parent is experiencing right now. Eating, because it does have such a big place in our lives, both physically and socially, culturally, emotionally. It's important that you look at, what does it look like for your family and for your child? So you might talk about changes in eating. You might talk about how the person is receiving nutrition, if they're getting that through maybe, say, a feeding tube or some other way, or talk about how eating and drinking slows as they near end of life. What will your child smell? What are the smells that they've noticed? Talk about how things may smell different. Again, it's one of those subtle things, but it's really important. There are smells that change as a body begins to change. And there are also different smells in different places. Keep your language honest and not overwhelming. And always pair the information that you're giving with choice and support. Depending on the situation, you might say something like, it might smell a little different than you remember. Or some people say it smells a little like medicine or alcohol or something unfamiliar. But don't ever assume that the children won't notice, because many of them do. And because we are very sensory oriented, preparing them for this helps reduce the risk of distress or lasting sensory memory, because that can be something that we associate over time. Offering them opportunities to walk out of the room if they want to is important. Giving them, if they want to carry something that has a smell that they enjoy into the room, if you know that there might be different smells, or allowing them to choose a lotion or a candle or something that is familiar, maybe that person's favorite fragrance, into the room can create a more positive sensory connection. So let's walk through another framework, this time talking about the changes in eating. So you're going to name it. As mom's body stops working, she won't need to eat or drink as much. Explain it. As mom's body gets closer to the end of life, it begins to slow down by not feeling hungry or thirsty anymore. Provide that reassurance. This happens because the body isn't using food the same way it used to, not because anyone stopped trying. They are not starving. Their body is simply changing how it works. And then prepare them. Here's what you might notice. Mom may slowly start eating less until she doesn't want to eat at all. It's not painful and it's not something that needs to be fixed. It's part of the body's way of preparing for death. And then those questions. What are you wondering about? What else would you like to know? Then our final sense is the sense of touch. What can your child touch or not touch? Where can they sit? Is it okay to lay on the bed or to snuggle? Can they hug or kiss or hold hands? How might that feel differently to them if there's been changes? What can they not touch in the room? It's important to set those boundaries for them and let them know up front what might not be okay to touch. And then how can they help? What can they do in that space? Providing opportunities for them to manipulate medical equipment when possible can be very helpful. You might even consider, if you have younger children, bringing in a play medical kit or having it at the bedside if say you were at home, and that gives the child something to do. As you can see in this picture, this little boy is using a stethoscope to listen or check his mom's foot. And so she had just come out of surgery and had a mastectomy. So he was told that, it wasn't going to be comfortable for him to touch his mom's chest. So another part of her body was suggested so that he could still actively take care of her. And that's a huge part of him being able to just experience that environment and that world. If you need to, lean into your medical staff or maybe the hospice team, because they are more than willing to help you navigate this piece of what the kids can and can't do in the different environments. Okay, this next piece I just want to touch on briefly to mention something that occurs when someone is dying. And this is rarely talked about, I think, or people are rarely prepared for it, especially children. But I've worked with a couple of clients who really had some hurt or bothered feelings by things that their loved one said or did near the time of death. And so near the time of death, delirium is something that can happen. Delirium is defined as a temporary change in how our brain works. And And so it's important to prepare kids for this by telling them that it's not caused by, that delirium is caused by the illness and because it's affecting their brain. But it is not intentional and it's not who that person truly is. And so while delirium may look like that person being confused or saying things that they would not normally say, or behaving in ways that they may have never behaved before. It again is just a change in their brain. So we've developed a tip sheet that goes through all of this information, and you can access that on our website so that you can have more information if that's something that you would like to share with your family. So we're going to transition now. What does it actually look like to support children during the time of death or shortly after? First, it's important that we recognize that children may have very many different reactions. Their emotions may be intense, but they may also be calm. They may look very different from other people's emotional responses at that time, and they can vary quickly. All of that is normal. You may see tears or anger. You may see some of them be silent. Some may leave and walk away or play. All of those things are normal. Give them permission to express all of these different emotions in ways that are safe and helpful to them. The best comfort that you can give your child during this time is to tell them that they're safe, to tell them that they're loved, and to tell them that someone will be taking care of them. The second important thing is, you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Kim, is what do you do during this time? Like we've mentioned before, we are all active people and we feel less helpless when we have something to do. And so for many people, they need ways to express themselves. They might play music. They might sit at the bedside and share stories or letters that they've written, share memories. They might want to just sit quietly and hold their hand. They may want to express themselves in some other way. They may want to just play near the bed, or they may want to come and go as they need to. All of these are acceptable choices, and all of these help them find purpose and meaning during this very specific time around death. So, as we talk about this, you might be asking yourself, should my child be present when someone dies? And just like Kim and Katie and I shared at the beginning, we all come to this from very different experiences of what you've had in the past. And that may shape how you feel or what you think you would want for your own children. And so it's a thoughtful, important question to ask, and there's not a right answer. Every child, every family, every situation is going to be different. Ultimately, you know your child best, and it's okay to take time to consider what's most appropriate for your family. However, I'd like to give you some things today to think about as you make this decision so that you can better assess and know whether this is a good decision for your child and for your family. So think first about, is being present actually an option? So what are the medical circumstances that are happening? What's the timing? What is the setting where this is taking place? Those will all factor into your decision. Does your child want to be present? Are they asking you for that? And if they are, have you been able to give them age appropriate information? All of these things that we have discussed up to this point. All of that goes to them being able to make an informed choice. And so if they've had that preparation, then you'll be able to know if they're ready or not. And then how does your child typically cope with stressful or emotional situations? Think about their temperament, their past experiences, and their own coping style, because that will tell you how they might deal with this situation. And then also who will be present. We've talked about numerous times as well of identifying that support person. Who else is going to be present in the room? How will that dynamic impact your child, and who will be focused on supporting them? And then can your child leave or take breaks if needed? If you have a young child, they're not going to be able to sit in the room for a long period of time. So taking their developmental stage into an account when you're trying to decide that. And so are they able to leave without disrupting the process or everyone else? Um, Having an out for older kids and them having permission to leave or to come and go as they need to, that can also help give them control in being able to make their decision. And then what preparation will your child have ahead of time? This is what we've spent this whole time talking about. How might your child feel afterward? What support will be available to them? We're going to discuss that in the next couple of slides. And then who can help you continue to think through all of these things in order to make the best choice for your family? So think about your medical team, your hospice team. Think about our Wonders and Worries helpline. There's child life specialists who are available to talk through some of these options with you. And then what other trusted community supports might there be? It might be clergy or close friends or family. It might be a counselor or a therapist who's involved in your care. So there are a lot of people who can come around you. You don't have to make this decision on your own. One more thought about that is that remember that your children don't have to be present in order to say goodbye. So, or to feel connected for that matter. So, all of those things that we talked about in the slide of activities that you can do or that they can do during this time, those can be done whether they're at the bedside and they're present at the time of death, or whether they're in a separate room or even in a completely separate location. They can still choose to do those activities in the way that they need to. You might talk about how they want to be informed after the death has occurred. And so that may play into how you make those, how you do those activities. The most important thing is just that they're supported, that they're prepared, and that they're given a choice whenever possible. So let's shift now and talk a little bit about how do we actually prepare them for when that time comes. So children might have questions about what is actually going to happen. And again, you can prepare your child for these things that will occur, whether or not they choose to be present. They may still want to know what are the things that are going to happen to the person that they're loved, that they love. They will fill in the blanks with information when information isn't provided, but they'll also lead you to what they are able to take in and understand at that time. So um, inviting them into this conversation with saying, you know, this is what is happening to your dad, and what would you like to know about what's happening right now? That will let you know if they're ready to hear this information. But you want to kind of walk through all of these things. Explain that their breathing will slow, that there will be more time between each breath. Sometimes the breathing may sound louder or it may be uneven. This is a normal part of the body preparing for death. There will be changes in the level of awareness and alertness. They may sleep more and more. Their heartbeat will slow. If they become agitated, there might be a nurse who will give them medication to comfort them, to help them to be calm. And then movement will slowly become minimal. And you can say, there will be a moment when the body stops working completely, and that is when the person has died. Provide concrete information about what is happening to the body at that time of death. The heart stops beating, the lungs stop breathing, and the body is completely still. After the death has occurred, based on the choices that you've made earlier for them to be present or not be present, you're still going to want to prepare them for what comes next. You want to use those five senses again and prepare them for the physical changes that will happen after death, including loss of color to the skin, change in temperature of the skin. It will become cool. Stiffness of the body that will occur during time, depending on the time frame of if they, come at a little while after the death to come and say goodbye. Again, this is a time to use that preparation to be able to talk through what do they think might happen, what do they want to be a part of. And based on the where the person is, you'll want to discuss the type of care provided to the body after death. Um, in this picture, you can see this flag draped gurney. And I worked with a teenage patient who her dad died in a military hospital. And as a military vet, they were offered an honor walk as an opportunity after his body was taken from the room to the morgue. And this was told to the family, but details about it were not given to this teenager. And so when I met with her, she had a lot of concerns because she had some misconceptions about what this might look like. And so she had questions about, were they going to take him out? And was she going to see his body as well as the other people that would be standing there in the hall? And she had made the decision prior that she did not want to be present at his death. And so it took us some time, but we worked through exactly what this would look like. She knew what a morgue was, and she thought that her family would have to walk and accompany him into the morgue. And that was a frightening scenario for her. So after she had time to ask her questions and to process this and to understand that the flag would cover the body, that people would not see him, that she would not be walking into the morgue, she could confidently make a decision that she wanted to be a part of this ceremony, which was important to her family. If the person dies at home, then children need to understand what that process might look like. That who is going to come to the home to care for the body afterwards? Where will the body be taken? How will the body be taken from the home? So answering all of those questions and having a plan for that. Again, you can base all of these decisions on the circumstances of your particular situation, using all of those assessment pieces that we talked about earlier. We have many resources that can also help you and guide you through all of these different pieces. And you can always reach out to the child life specialists on our helpline to get additional support. So your cultural and religious beliefs are going to play a large role in what decisions you make on how to explain what happens to the body after death. So often there are conversations about the body and the soul, and it can be confusing to kids, right? Because our soul is not a visible, tangible thing that they can touch and feel. And so here's one analogy that we've put together that can be helpful in explaining this to your children. So when someone is alive on earth, their soul and their spirit is connected to their body. When they die, their body stops working. We can tangibly show this using this hand and glove model. So we can show that the soul and the spirit separate from the body by removing that glove. And then we can explain what happens to the body separately from what's happening to the spirit. So some younger kids have concerns about what happens to their loved one after they die. And so they may ask questions like, well, are they going to be cold? Or are they going to be hungry? And so this is a great way that you can use this to explain the body, the glove, is no longer working. And so if it's no longer working, it doesn't need food and it doesn't get hungry and those kinds of things. You can show the soul, the hand, and that is the beliefs about what you think happens to the soul and the spirit. Oftentimes, we still think of that being in an active state, that the soul remains, and maybe your religious beliefs are that the soul looks down on them, or that they're in heaven, that kind of thing. But you can adapt this analogy to fit what your individual cultural or religious beliefs are. But it's, again, a tangible visual example that kids can use to kind of understand how those two things separate and how each one is taken care of in a different way. So let's look through this next framework. And we want to talk about how to explain cremation. This is a choice that families make, but it can be a hard one to describe to children. And sometimes we have our own images and fears about how this works and how to explain it. So first we want to name it. After someone dies, one way they take care of a body is called cremation. And then explain it. Cremation means the body is placed in a very hot place where it is turned into soft ashes or cremains. And then we want to reassure them. The person cannot feel anything because the body has stopped working. When someone dies, they cannot feel pain anymore. And then prepare them. After Dad's memorial, we'll have a small container called an urn that will hold the ashes or the cremains. Some people feel sad or upset or even peaceful when they see it. However you feel is okay. And then invite questions. What are you wondering about? There are many ways to provide opportunities for children to say goodbye. So the timing of this may vary, and some choices can be repeated or done at different times throughout the time period after the death. They can write, here's a couple of examples. They can write a note. We've used dissolvable paper, and they use a marker and they write on the paper the note or the feelings or remembrances that they want to share. And then that's placed into a container of bubble solution. It dissolves, and then they use the bubble wand to blow those bubbles into the air, releasing those thoughts that they want to share with the person that they love. You can do a balloon release, and even just saying a simple prayer is a great way for them to have that opportunity to say goodbye. Including children in rituals and services is an important way to help them honor their loved one and to continue to say goodbye. But you want to prepare them again for what to expect when this happens, depending on the type of service. If it is a funeral service or a celebration of life, if it's a wake, if it is, any other type of service, it's just important to go through with them what the expectations are, what their role might be, and the timing of how that will flow. And remember their limits and temper your expectations for them. So, one way you can do this is putting together a funeral service coping kit, and it may be just taking a small bag and putting items in there, things that they can draw on, things that they can fidget or manipulate while they're sitting and waiting. It just helps them to occupy their time. At funerals, there's often a lot of waiting time. There's a lot of quiet time. There's time when lots of adults are having conversations. And so giving your child something that they can actively do during that time can be helpful. Also, creating a support plan if your child wants to step away from the service is going to be important. Who is somebody who can facilitate that for them if you are needing to be involved or want to be present during the service? Offering choices about how they would like to be involved. So, would they like to pick a picture to have in the service? Would they like to participate by providing a reading? Do they want to pick a favorite song? Those are great ways for them to participate and be a part of that. It may be even as simple as selecting food that will be served after the service. Maybe they want to choose the favorite foods of the person that they loved. All right, so that brings us back to, again, to reactions. And we've talked about their reactions at several different points. But I think it's important to remind you again that these reactions are going to change over time and that they're going to vary from child to child and from different age groups. Young children, just like Kim explained with the puddle jumping, they're going to probably be in that same place after death. And so they may express their emotions openly and intermittently. So when they feel safe or when they feel those emotions come on, they'll release them, and then they may go back and they play and do something. Adults and teenagers are different. We tend to hang on to our feelings and kind of wait for an appropriate time to release those, or they stay right under the surface, and then there's some triggering activity or event that may cause a big emotional release. But teenagers may need time just to be alone or maybe to just hang out with their friends. That's normal. That's the way that they're going to process and to work through their grief. Some lingering things that happen throughout the grief process are exhaustion, both physically and mentally. It's draining to grieve another person, and difficulty with focus and attention may continue to be a problem for a while. And so acknowledging that, letting children know that that's a normal part of this experience and that it's okay, and then coming up with ways that they can provide some self-care. If that is taking a break or talking to someone that they need to share their feelings and emotion, or just recognizing that it's okay that right now I can't take on more than I can do. All right, as we come to this last slide and we're starting to close this, I want to again acknowledge the weight of this discussion. If you have stayed through from the very beginning, this has been a lot. And it probably feels very heavy to you. So I want to just take a quick moment to take a slow, deep breath. If you can close your eyes and then just take a big, deep breath in and count to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And just slowly breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Open your eyes, and as you open them, I want you to look at this picture. What do you see? Where do your eyes stay? Do they stay on the hard rocks around the edges, the harshness of that? Or do they go through and they see the light, white, wispy clouds, or the green trees, or the mountains in the background? I think hope is very similar to this image. When we are in these incredibly hard, painful places, hope pulls us forward. It helps us keep looking for the light. And we need that hope. Hope helps us balance the helplessness that we might be feeling. And you may be fearful of having these difficult conversations because you're worried that maybe you're stealing hope from your children. And I want to assure you that you are not stealing hope from them. You are helping them find every ray of light in the darkest places. And know that hope changes and it evolves. It doesn't go away, it just shifts into new shapes. In the beginning, hope for you may have looked like a cure, but today, hope can look like hoping for a good day, hoping for time together, hoping for time to say the important things that matter, hoping that your loved one feels that love. Hope can and does exist along with the sadness. So maybe take a step back and ask your children, what are you hoping for today? What's one small thing that maybe could be better about today? Hope is not about fixing what's wrong. It's finding meaning and connection and moments that still matter. In finding that connection and maintaining the memories and the rituals following the death of someone that you love, it carries that hope forward. I really appreciate you attending this today and listening to all of this. And if you only hear one thing, I hope it's this, that you do not have to navigate this alone. Wonders and Worries is here, and we will be here to support you and your family. So I'm going to turn it back over to Katie, and she's going to share some more resources for us.
And so Katie had some internet difficulty, but we are so glad that you all are here, and we are aware that we went beyond what we originally were thinking our time frame would be. But knowing how important this topic is, we didn't want to rush any of it. So thank you for staying with us to this point. I'm just going to briefly touch on a few resources. We did not have additional questions at this point, so we'll go through our resources and just encourage each of you individually to reach out with any questions that you may have. Our helpline we've talked about throughout. There are specific hours for our helpline, which currently are Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Central, but you can leave a voicemail or reach out via email at any time. If you are wondering about something at midnight, you can reach out to our helpline and our team will connect with you the next helpline shift. We have other Wonder Chats for parents that might support the things that you are doing as a family. Kind of that, what I think of as a foundational presentation is this first one, how to have difficult conversations with your children. We touch on some other components that might be helpful. If you're a family where you're not at that point of focusing on end of life, but you're dealing with an ongoing incurable illness, there's a Wonder Chat focused on that. And then there's one focused specifically on crafting memories in the face of illness. And then here, there are many, many resources around grief, but here are two that are great places to start. The National Alliance for Children's Grief, you can go to their website. There are many, many tip sheets and tools that you can download. And then you can also search for specific grief organizations in your community. So they have a search tool that's really beneficial. And then the Dougy Center, their website is very robust with lots of resources. And then we want to mention our free app. If you are not aware or have not yet downloaded our free app for parents, it does have information kind of across the spectrum of coping with illness or injury in your family, including end of life and time of death. And then we didn't have additional questions, as I mentioned, but please reach out to us. And then this QR code for those who are attending live, if you don't mind scanning that QR code, you'll also get a follow-up email with the link. We would love your feedback and input for this Wonder Chat and for future Wonder Chats. And if you're watching the recorded webinar, please pause and scan this QR code. It's a very quick feedback survey. And then I want to stop at this last slide with our email addresses and our website. Please feel free to reach out to any of us directly. We've mentioned our helpline, but we are each here individually to support your family. So feel free to reach out to us. And I think Katie may have joined back, but I'm not 100% sure, but you there, Katie?
Yes, sorry.
No problem. We reached the end. Is there anything else that you want to add?
No, but I'm thankful for all of you joining in, and I'm sure Kim went over all of the ways that you can reach out to us for questions and things, but definitely ask us if you have specific questions or things that we can help with. We want to help.
Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you so much.